David Hirschland is a friend of mine and somebody I've worked with for a long time. David's been in this business far too long to be as young as he is and as beautiful as he is. He started out studying English literature, right, at Brown?
Yeah.
And then went to and he was an agent. And he was a manager, and he ended up going to law school at UCLA, and he found his way eventually, and we'll talk about all this, but he found his way into music publishing. He eventually grew to be, came to be, the president of Bug Music, which was a huge independent publisher. Bug was acquired by BMG Chrysalis a few years ago, where David is right now, the executive vice president. I'd like you to meet and welcome and make him feel the love, David Hirschland.
Wow. Thank you, Billy.
Well, hi.
Thank you, Billy. Hello.
It's my pleasure. So,
hello.
Welcome.
It's good to be here.
David, you like this because you like New Orleans, right?
I love New Orleans.
Big part of why people are here is because they love New Orleans. It's one of the main draws to this university, as it turns out.
Yeah.
And you've been coming here for a while.
I've been coming here since, when you said far too long to be this, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you when I first came here, Billy, because it was a fun
I'm
story.
Interested. Yeah.
I was a booking agent at the time. I was booking fun bands, great artists like Muddy Waters and Willie Dixon, and George Thorogood was one of our bigger artists. We had this blues band from DC called the Nighthawks. I'm sure some of you, very few of you guys know, you may remember them. They were sort of like what the Fabulous Thunderbirds were Texas, and Nighthawks were the great blues band from DC, and they played Tips every year at Mardi Gras. And one year I was on my way to Baltimore for a conference, and I said, let's see, New Orleans is on the way to Baltimore, and it's the weekend, Mardi Gras is the weekend before I have to be in Baltimore. So I managed to make it to New Orleans for the first time as a roadie for the Nighthawks. And, going up and meeting Dr. John and Riverboat president with them, and it was the best introduction, and from then on I've been hooked ever since.
Wow, that is a good story.
And the old Tips was awesome. The new Tips is cool, but the old Tips was really fun.
None of them know the old Tips, so they don't know the difference.
The old Tips stage was about 18 inches. You could really get up in it.
Yeah, right. Get right up on the music. That's awesome. Talk a little bit about your path, your career path, because I like to start with that as a question or as an initial entree into the conversation, because they're all thinking these thoughts. What is their path going to be? How are they going to find their way into what they're doing?
Yeah, that's a great entry point. First, I just want to ask, I spoke at Lo and Scott's class earlier today, so how many of you have heard some of this? Okay, so I'll try to mix it up a little bit. I won't tell as many lies as I did then. I got into the music business as, kind of through radio, actually. I did radio in college, but Brown had this incredible station, 50,000 watt FM station that because you're BRU. And it's still a force in college radio, but then it was really the I think, arguably best college radio station. And we had reach. We reached South Boston, we reached Cape Cod. And so the artists would all come up and visit us. So I got to know, I personally interviewed the Eagles, Tom Waits, Harry Nilsson, Jackson Browne, on and on kind of. And having that sort of one-on-one experience with artists really inspired me to want to be in this business. That's kind of how I decided I had the passion for it, and I felt like even though I wasn't, I was a failed drummer in a junior high band, I knew I didn't have the musical talent, but I felt like I had the kind of, smarts, if you will, to help artists. And so
And that, by the way, that is so common in all likely members of the artist's team, is this idea that you just want to help. You just want to help. If you love the music, you want to help the artist continue to make it and to make the music, but you also want the music to be heard. So you want to share the music as well. So,
yeah, and and this goes to to management more than necessarily publishing, but it is passion is 90% of it. I mean, you have to believe, and that's what artists they all need someone to believe in them. I mean, that's what their fragile egos require, and and if you do and you're sincere, 10% of that is really the skill part. It's really having the passion. And so, I mean, just to sort of fast forward, I was a manager for a little while. I mean, I went kind of from the radio thing into booking, which is a great gig, mainly because it wasn't a great gig because booking is pretty,
thankless.
Well, it's not thankless as much as it's boring, really. And you're dealing with, and there's not much nuance.
Right.
You're just hammering, you're having these arguments with promoters and club owners, and most of whom are the dregs of society for a reason. I mean, they own bars because there's nothing else, no other function they could possibly have in this world, right? So,
not that you shouldn't go into agency, but...
Well, no, and listen, especially now, I mean, we're talking, I mean, I happen to, publishing is one of the, if we're talking about career choices, publishing is a good one. It's worked out really well. I'll talk more about that. Live, and the live world is a good one, whether you're on one side or the other. I mean, look, people are still paying incredible amounts of money to see people perform. Even, I happen to also be the president of the board of Folk Alliance. It's one of my volunteer things, and you'd be just amazed at how many people throughout this country and the world are able to make a living playing live music. It's really inspiring and phenomenal. So, yeah, being the head of a record label, maybe not so great these days. Although if you're good, if you're good at it, you can succeed. It's just that there's fewer chances for success. But
management, agency, publishing.
Yeah,
right.
When
you're looking for money.
Yeah, exactly. So so the publishing thing, I got around to it sort of circuitously because I did management. And it had been like a total of 10 years of booking and management, and I was frankly just kind of burned out. Plus the major artist I was managing, who is, an incredible talent still.
Can you talk about who you managed?
Yeah, well, my first client was Lucinda Williams, and I was her first manager, and that was, I just completely fell in love with her as an artist and wanted a way out of booking and decided to pursue management, which was more interesting. Plus, artists I truly believed in, I wanted to do more for them. I mean, it's one thing to route the perfect date, but it's another thing to.
That's it. Like my thing was, I was label manager at Sire, and it was the same thing. Everything was pro forma. There was like, I put together the same plans and worked had the same function. And at some point, if you really love music, if you really love artists, you want to advocate for the artist directly. Right,
and break out of the box. Do some thinking, do some things that have never been done.
Yeah.
And every artist is unique and requires a different. But Lucinda happened to be, and I also I managed a band, co-managed a band called NRBQ from the great New England. They were the state band of Connecticut for many years. And then a couple of other writers, Peter Case, who I still think is a great artist. And
amazing writer.
He was married at the time to Victoria Williams, so for some reason I decided managing a married couple would be a good idea. I basically had unmanageable talent, but Lucinda was the main thing, and the world just wasn't ready for her. I knew she was like one of the greatest songwriters in the country. She had written songs in those days that, well, Passionate Kisses became the country song of the year in 1987 for Carpenter, Mary Chapin Carpenter. Lucinda wrote it actually in my house in Tahoe in 1984. I'll never forget, at midnight with my buddy and sitting around the fireplace and Lucinda saying, "Y'all want to hear a new song I just wrote?" And it was Passionate Kisses, and I was just like, wow, I'm in the right place. But it turned out that in those days, record companies were very regimented. They had their country departments and they had their rock departments, and Lucinda was right in the middle. She was alt country, and there was no such thing as alt country. Right. We used to sit in the bar in LA with Dwight Yoakam and 18 people in the audience, and Dwight would just shake his head, say, somehow I made it, but I don't know how, And so anyway, long story short, decided law school was the answer, and actually it turned out great. I went to law school and then practiced for 5 years and did music and film and copyright and trademark and got a really broad education in the law. And then the Bug Music guys called me up and offered me the gig, and it's turned out to be great. It's like 20 years ago.
And a little bit on Bug Music, if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely.
It's a good story of a company that, anybody could have started that company up.
Yeah, no, it's a really good, and it also points out the differences between today and, it's an interesting study in what's different in, about then and now. But it was 1975, and this young guy from Detroit, Dan Burgoyce, happened to be Del Shannon's biggest fan, and also got to know him, and Del really liked him and actually hired him to be his manager. He was 19 years old, and Del had already had these huge hits with Runaway and Hats Off to Larry, and moved to LA, and Dan went with him, and Del was the victim, like a lot of he wasn't a blues, he was really a rock guy, but a lot of he came out of Detroit, and the whole blues thing where the record label guy put his name on the songs and got the publishing without really having the rights to it, but just basically stole the songs. And Dan spent years getting Del's copyrights back to him, and then when he finally succeeded in getting Del's copyrights back to him, he said, "Okay, now what do we do?"
Right.
And he said, "Well, I guess I have to manage these copyrights. I need to form an administration company." And that's how Bug was born. And he happened to start it at the time when the whole the whole new wave punk thing was happening all over the country. But in LA, it was bands like X and the Blasters and Germs and Circle Jerk. There were just tons of bands, and no major companies were paying any attention to them. There was a little label called Slash.
Yep, and there's a lot of great songwriting.
Incredible songwriting. Yeah. Dave Alvin, who's one of the the Blasters, one of the great songwriters. We're licensing still to this day probably an average of a Dave Alvin song a month in a TV show or a film.
Yep. Yeah.
The Judge, which is the film that Robert Downey Jr. just came out with
Duvall.
Robert Duvall, Long White Cadillac. In fact, Dwight Yoakam's version, that's in that song, that film. So these songs are iconic. They were great songs. Iggy Pop signed up almost immediately, and his catalog has been just, ridiculous.
Especially through Syncs, especially.
Syncs. Yeah, The Passenger has been the theme song for Captain Morgan Rum for the last 5 years. His song "Lust for Life" was
Trainspotting.
Trainspotting gave that song a new lease in life, and then shortly thereafter, Caribbean Cruises licensed
used Lust for Life.
And
yeah, that's right.
One of the best stories I have of a sync ad was, we negotiated this whole deal. It was a couple pretty good, maybe $250,000 or something like that for a year for them to use Lust for Life, which of course I'm sure, hopefully a lot of you know it, but it's basically the dun 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 dun. It's basically just that drum beat, and then literally the day before the ad was supposed to run, we get this frantic call from the agency, and she says, the chairman of the board of Caribbean Cruises just found out that song's about drugs, and and we need a letter from your client denying that. And I said, you have got to be kidding. I said, there is no way I am calling Iggy Pop to say, can you lie about what you're, I mean, listen to the song. The first lyric is, here comes Johnny Yen again with the liquor and drugs. You know, it's like, what about this, you know, it's like you're just realizing this, you know. So we said no, and they caved and did it anyway. But it was just like, really, you know, people, it's like, people are funny in that way.
Yeah, crazy.
Anyway, so we got, so the Bug had those great icon, you know, they had the Willie Dixon catalog, which to this day, it just amazes me. You know, we actually had our highest quarter ever last quarter for that catalog.
For Willie Dixon.
For the Willie Dixon
There's
catalog.
so much, there's so many songs, like songs you don't even know Willie Dixon wrote.
You know, Spoonful, I Just Want to Make Love to You. I mean, Coke has been using I Just Want to Make Love to You in Europe they used it for like years ago, and they just revived it again. Spoonful is now the song for Haagen-Dazs ice cream in Europe. It's like, it's just amazing. These great songs. So that's what's great about publishing is we're not just dependent on record sales. In fact, I have these little charts here just to throw some numbers out. I mean, currently, in the latest figure, there's actually people are kind of surprised to hear this, but 36% of revenue for publishing still comes from mechanical licensing.
That does surprise me.
A lot of people, and you're an educated man. Yeah. You're the head of a music business.
I wouldn't say that.
Well, but no, I think a lot of people assume nobody's buying records anymore. Right. Well, they actually are, and they actually are also paying for downloads. So now it's obviously going down. That figure's going down, not up. 30% is performance, 28% is synchronization, and 6% the other income streams like karaoke and print licensing.
And that's of the entire publishing pie.
That's the entire publishing pie. Right. Yeah, the whole. Yeah. So some artists obviously in this day and age, you know, derive a majority of income from sync. And we were talking in classes earlier, like how do you sign new writers and you know, because a lot of them are unsigned to labels. I mean, it used to be really easy. So when I started 20 years ago, you just figured out how many records you were going to sell, and then you just said, okay,
count on mechanicals.
This is how much we're going to make, and you're pretty much dead on. And now the projections are literally changing weekly as to what we think, you know, records are going to sell, and it's just, you know, it's falling off the table. But, you know, obviously there are exceptions, and there are, you know, it's a singles world now, so if you can get, you know, a pop single, that's a whole nother story. Yep. You know, Taylor Swift just sold, or will sell, in excess of 1 million first week. I'm hoping, because I have 3/5 of them, I'm hoping the Foo Fighters record does half that. I would be thrilled if it does half that, but I mean, that's a record that has been set up so incredibly perfectly right now with the HBO special and the way Dave made this record.
Yeah, you know what? Could we talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Because you said it was set up perfectly. I'd like to tie that down to some specifics.
Sure.
So what do you mean when you say that? It's set up so perfectly.
Well, I mean, who does a week of Letterman? I mean, they did a week of Letterman. Not only that, but I mean, the whole, you know, the whole thing came out. I mean, first of all, Dave, you know, whether you're a fan of the music or not, you have to admire the marketing genius of Dave Grohl, if nothing else, and he follows his heart. He makes this movie, Sound City, which is I don't know how many of you saw that.
Saw Sound City. Yeah, good.
Yeah,
good.
I mean, it's just one of the best, I think, rock documentaries, and goes into detail about the process that goes on in recording and pays homage to this studio in Van Nuys, this obscure place that Nirvana made their record and Petty made all of his records. And if you haven't seen it, you ought to see it. It's great. So Dave took that model and said, that's how I'm going to make my next record. I'm going to go to all these legendary studios, you know, came to New Orleans, Austin, Nashville, Washington, D.C., Chicago, 8 cities, and got to and basically lived in these cities for a week or two and wrote the songs there, not just sort of interviewing people, interviewing Buddy Guy in Chicago, Shorty here, and some other people, and then out of that process came these songs, and then they shot the whole thing, recorded the song, shot the recording of the song, and then built a documentary in each city, and it's an 8-part series on HBO, which is airing now. The 3 of them have aired. Record comes out next week. So you've got an 8-part HBO series. You've got 5 nights on Letterman with different guest stars. Right. They're touring now. They were just in Nashville. They were just
here
Lyman.
on Saturday. They just played
They
Voodoo.
were here.
Yep.
They were in, so they're matching their tour to the cities so the HBO airs the New Orleans episode. They're in New Orleans. So it's just kind of like it's just
what
really
it is.
Cool.
What it is innovative. Like there's no way they thought they could just deliver the record and sell records.
Right.
So
they could, but it's like, but what would be the point,
Well, and I don't know that they'd get the attention that they need to get to make an exceptional splash, or to make, or to really wrest people's attention from the things that they're already paying attention to, or not paying attention to. And when you talked about passion being 90% of it, there's this, I talk about that a lot, like passion and tenacity. That's where everything comes from. You can teach yourself all the rules and regulations and the whys and wherefores, but another major aspect of being in the business today, I think, is by definition innovation. You're going to have to make it special, no matter what you do. At whatever level, you can make it special. Right. And they're relentlessly creative in creating that specialness, and I think that's what's needed now. Makes it more.
Yeah, you
more
have
fun.
to. You have to work harder to stand out, and you have to be innovative. That's true, and obviously, not too many people have the opportunity to do it on the scale that the Foo Fighters can do it, but. Still, even you got to be more creative in your thinking. I think that's the watchword for today, because you have to stand out. There's way too much noise just perpetrating that. Yeah.
And creativity does scale. You can be sure it's easy to be creative when you say, "Hey, have a film crew follow me around. We'll have that." That it's sort of. We usually talk about ideas scaling as kind of going from small to very big, but creativity scales the other way too. So you can think of a way, if you're a resource-constrained band that's just trying to get to 1,000 record sales, you can think of some way to make this special for your people, because you know your people, because you know yourself, because we talk about values here all the time, and that's what, when we were talking about this being a values-based music industry program, that's what makes this a boutique thing. Is that I think we're talking about understanding your values, your audience's values, being able to create meaningful product for those people.
Right.
So that it's that we're all in this together, making it fun and making it better all the time. And that's where I think that Dave's a great example of innovation.
Yeah, and I mean, you could, just what you were saying kind of reminded me of, first of all, it's got to be good. I mean, obviously, it's got to be good. Yeah. But then, if you can, what flashed into my head when you were talking was pledge music. I don't know how many people know pledge music, but I think that's just a brilliant business model. Yep. Because through social media, they take advantage of you build your contact base through social media, and then they reach out to them.
And email. They love it. They love a big email list.
Yeah, absolutely. And but then the whole idea of tailoring a product to a fan base that already exists and funding the project that way is a perfect, to me, model for the 21st century.
Right. It's creating serial delight. Right. You're making product for the people who care the most about the product. Right. And then the great thing about Pledge and Kickstarter, Indiegogo as well, for the same reasons, you're forced to create a product line. Right. It's not just putting out a record.
No, but it's exactly right. That's right. They force you to be innovative in this way.
Yeah.
So taking it back to, it's interesting because the other thing about this is a nuts and bolts publishing example. Yep. So when Dave did make, I represent, not to, I don't want to be inaccurate. I don't represent Dave Grohl's publishing, but I have Pat Smear, who's in the band and who started out as a punk in LA with the Germs. and Nate Mandel, who's the bass player. And Sound City, those of you who saw it know Paul McCartney participated, and they cut a song with Paul McCartney that was a co-write between McCartney, Dave, and Pat. And it just so happened, so the Sound City, from a publishing point of view, I made no money on that project. It didn't, it was great that it got made, but the reality is there was no real income, except we get this call from.
What exactly is going on?
I don't know.
It got huge.
Sound got huge.
We are
Now. Hello. We get a call that Ralph Lauren wants to. The song's called "Cut Me Some Slack." Ralph Lauren wants to use the song in a campaign for 2 years.
But only for slacks.
Well, yeah. Cut me
Just cut me some slacks.
Yeah, cut me some slacks. So it.
Just kidding.
We're like,
it's not true.
Bingo, here we go. It's like, payday.
Yeah.
So we actually worked out it, but it wasn't the money that it should have been because Ralph and Paul happen to be buddies. And Paul ends up actually calling Foo Fighters management and calling Dave and saying, look, mate, can you do a favor for my mate Ralph Lauren here? So actually, Paul McCartney, on behalf of Ralph Lauren, is trying to talk Dave down on the fee. We got a good laugh out of that. It's like, come on, you guys, it's going to cost you what it's going to cost you. But the point,
Paul doesn't like the whole idea of
the point of all that name dropping is that even with the successful documentary film, the only real money and an album, the only real money we made was on that commercial.
Wow.
So, to circle back, hopefully the Foo Fighters are going to sell a ton of records, but we're also going to need some big film syncs, and we're going to need some commercials, or we're going to need something to get the thing in where it needs to be.
Yeah. Well, we do want to touch on revenue streams in today's music, right? So
actually, yes.
And here we are, a lot of us in this room. We're audio professionals here.
Right. I can tell. Can you all hear us?
You can hear, right? All right. So many of the people in this room write songs every day. And those songs are sleeping assets, right? If they're not going to do anything with it, when they write a song and they're music publishers, right? Instantly they become music publishers.
Right.
When they record that song, they become a record label, right? They have these assets that they create, and the question is, what are they going to do with them? Are they going to exploit them or not exploit them? Now, when you have songs, what do we do? What do we do with them? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, obviously there are a lot more songs in this world than there are places for them. So let's be realistic about that. I'm fond of saying, a good song will see the light of day. A good song will come out. A good song will be discovered. Question is, how do you get? There's tons of good songs. There's not that many great songs. We're obviously living in an age where the distribution of music is controlled by you and not by some corporate executive sitting in a tower. That's a good thing. But the number of views that are out there make it almost impossible for people to discover, absent some sort of innovation we talked about. So, how do you get your songs heard? Well, the obvious way, since, Bob Dylan created this, business model, not necessarily by himself, but is you go out and perform them, and you're good. You're a good performer, and your songs are good. Okay, that's the best way. The secondary way is you're not such a good performer, but you write great songs. Well, then find a performer, or find, someone in one of the classes is taking a class, songwriting class with Jim McCormick. Jim McCormick's a great, he happens to be a BMG writer, I'm proud to say, but he's a successful country music songwriter. Network people like that. Get them, try to get them to hear your songs. Make videos, audio, putting audio and video together is an absolute necessity in this day and age. beyond that, it just takes a lot of hard work and,
Yep.
and connections. Now, getting up to where I am in terms of, there are a lot of publishing companies out there. There are some that are more entry level than BMG is. But if I am significantly moved by something I hear, I have the ability to sign it. And as long as I've got enough support in my company, things like that happen. I love stuff that comes out of New Orleans. I've signed, and it's, look, it's paid off. The #2 rated show in the country right now is NCIS New Orleans. Now, it's not like, okay, they're using a ton of New Orleans music, but it's a good thing that the #2 rated show in the country shoots here, is based here, and has a New Orleans vibe. As bad as the show might be, I don't know, but Treme was a huge boon for us. I mean, so many of the writers I work with got, whether they're traditional Cajun guys or, New Orleans guys, Anders, Shorty, these guys all had songs on Treme. So there's definitely, much more so than 10 years ago, there is an awareness in the industry of stuff coming out of New Orleans. Now, I'm not saying, you guys are New Orleans centric. I have no idea what you're doing, but it helps that you're here if you're a creative artist.
Yep. And these people are writing songs in their style, and they're reaching out to their own fan base, and hopefully they are getting their stuff out there, and they are playing live, because so much happens in the live setting, right? They're selling those songs in that moment.
Yeah,
right? And
not only that, but that's how you build a following of people. I mean, you can do it. Look, there are YouTube sensations, of course there are, but they're few and far between. They're much more rare than people that are out there that play, clubs in their town and then meet bands that say, hey, why don't you come to Lafayette, because I got a show and you can open for me there, and then we'll go to bat, and you just build it out from there. That's how it happens.
And we have a lot of artists in this program who are doing that. We have artists who are, we've had some recent success out of the program with G-Eazy and Christoph Anderson, who's his producer and co-writer. Mm-hmm. He's involved in that whole record. We have bands here who get signed while they're still in school and go to work. The question I think that a lot of these kids have is, well, you said entry-level publishers. What is that? Who are those people?
Well,
and where do we find them? How do we get in touch with those? Because I don't think anybody thinks they're ready from day one for a publisher, but let's say they've been writing songs for a while. They've amassed a bit of a catalog. They've proofed this stuff in the market,
right.
And they start to feel like, yeah, you know what? There's a there. We made a couple of records. We put those records out with some rigor. We did our work, and now we would like somebody to sort of help us build a business on the publishing side.
Right. Yeah, well, one of the best ways, well, first of all, there are a number of, I could do a list, but it's, there's the Penn Music, there's a lot of good sort of boutique houses in LA and in Nashville. And
Nashville obviously is striking distance for a lot of these people.
Striking distance, and it's not all just country. There are indie publishers in Nashville that do take chances on artists that aren't doing just country.
There's a lot more all music in Nashville. We talk about Nashville for just a minute.
Yeah.
It's amazing that I know that the head of Paradigm Music, the agent, the Paradigm, the agency, the head of music just relocated his whole family from Northern California to Nashville.
Right.
Not for no reason.
Right.
And so, Nashville has a lot more hybrid vigor than it did.
Yeah, the artist community there has just grown exponentially, in the whole East Nashville scene. It's it's affordable. There's a lot of support there. If you're at that point and you can go to these conferences, whether it's South by Southwest or Americana, depending on what kind of music you are doing or working with, networking is such a huge thing. It really is. It's, you can put stuff on YouTube, you can email people, but there's nothing like, making an impression in person. So, and there's Folk Alliance, there's
We
a lot
actually
of
have a
things.
class here called networking, where in the fall they go to CMJ and Americana, and in the spring they go to South by Southwest, and depending on the year we also do MIDEM, and those are great opportunities to meet those entry-level publishers.
Yeah,
Right?
and I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's a ticket to I mean, again, it's a very tough business that has become just sort of naturally more restrictive because there's just not as much money in the business as there was. I mean, there's not this growth of record labels. They're not, the business is not growing to support a lot. But again, if your stuff is good, somebody will hear it and support it.
Well, just to say that, we're not about the idea that you can have step-by-step instructions to success. Right? This program is about kind of rewiring brains.
Right.
And saying, you're in one of the most competitive fields out there. You want to be able to gain attention for your music. You want to be able to build an audience. Put on your friggin' thinking cap and start creating new ways of doing that. And it's a little bit of natural selection. If you don't believe enough in your work to work hard enough to find an audience and to get to the level where somebody at an entry-level music publishing company comes to you after they see you showcase somewhere, or because you've put yourself in the right position by networking, then you'll go away. That's natural selection. But when I ask these questions on behalf of these kids, it's assuming that they are already turning over every stone, thinking new thoughts. There's a lot that we assume about you that you need to sort of live up to, which is that you're thinking clear thoughts about what you're doing, and you're living in a real world, and you're not, you're not lost in fantasy land. And so when we talk about these things, we're talking about these things in light of that assumption. So.
Cool. I was going to do. I promised one of the classes I talked to earlier today. I was going to do my diatribe.
Do it.
On Pandora
I
and
love the
Spotify,
diatribe.
And then we can take some questions or whatever you tell me. But I just wanted to. There is we're in a huge transitional moment, really, as far as I don't probably have to tell you guys, but you need to know, obviously, that we're in this. I mean, it's been happening for years, but in terms of the publishing world specifically, we're in this huge moment where publishers and master content providers are being threatened. Our livelihood is being threatened to a large extent by the digital media companies, the Google/YouTube. I mean, it's a common refrain that you hear people saying, hey, I got 600,000 views on Google this month and I got $23. The same thing with Spotify. I mean, you're making 0.00008 of a cent for every stream if you're a publisher. The reality is that publishing, and this goes to songwriters, specifically songwriters and publishing, publishers are hamstrung by laws that have existed for, in one case, the 1909 Copyright Act, of course, predates World War I, and the 1909 copyright set forth the rate that a third party may pay or has to pay to reproduce music. There's a section in that, the section 114, I just have to read from this briefly, of the Copyright Act forbids federal rate courts. And rate courts are the tribunals that decide. Right now the rate is 9.1 cents. It used to be 2 cents. It's 9.1 cents for every song sold on a master, right? That's what the songwriter gets. But the section of the copyright forbids federal rate courts from considering sound recording royalty rates as a relevant benchmark when setting performance royalty rates for songwriters and composers. This one section of the Copyright Act basically prevents or has caused this reality, which is for every $14 that a label makes from streams on Spotify, Pandora, the other streaming services, the publisher / songwriter is paid $1. That's the ratio. And the reason is because we are subject to two things: this rate that a court decides without even hearing about what the marketplace would pay for it, no evidence. And two, by a World War II era Department of Justice mandate on BMI and ASCAP that says you have to license all of your repertoire. You can't decide which songs to license, which not. If a radio station, a television network want to license your songs, you have to give them the right to license every song. So it's a performance. So the reality is that these companies are using the law, fighting in rate courts to deny a fair market value for songs. The only area in which there is a fair market value for a song in comparison to a master recording is the synchronization world, and in that world, we're all paid the same. It's favored nations. The master gets the same rate as the song, and therefore the market has spoken. It says a song right is as valuable as a master right. That's the only area in which there's a free market. In streaming, which is becoming the obviously, I'm sure if we took a survey in this room, it's becoming the most popular method of consuming music, is not fair, and it's not fair to songwriters, and it's not fair to publishers. And there's a Songwriter Equity Act that's in front of Congress, which will never pass, at least probably in this Congress or the next Congress, whenever there is a Congress that convenes. And our best hope for this is getting through to the Department of Justice, but that again is also an uphill battle. So I just want to say it's not pretty out there for songwriters.
Right, and this, there was one other thing I wanted to talk about, which is completely related, which is the move from ownership to acquisition models in terms of music consumption.
Right.
Right?
Right.
You know, yeah, it's great to know that your music is findable by anyone, anytime. If they read the name of your band in an article about another band and you're named as an influence, it's great that somebody can fire up Spotify and find you, listen to you, maybe come to fall in love with you. But the fact that that is the main model for consuming music, and it's on a steeply ascendant curve, right?
Yes.
That's a tremendous threat to the economy of songwriter and a music publisher, and that balance is tilting, very greatly right now. So I think that we've all been facing that situation, and these people are coming up in that world, coming out of school and going into this business in that way, and I think that it's on them to agitate for change.
Exactly. You guys have to agitate for change. And I'll tell you, when a band like U2 does what they did with Apple, it is a crippling blow to this effort. It's like I was so disgusted by that whole thing, as I think a lot of people were, for various different reasons.
How many of you disapproved of the U2 Apple thing? Disapproved.
I mean, some people disapproved on privacy, on just simple privacy, the fact that all those things showed up on their phones. But from the fact that the guy in the street now thinks music should be free because, hey, U2's album is free, is a crippling blow to this effort of making people understand that music has to somehow be fairly compensated. I agree with you. The streaming services are incredible.
Yeah, and it's a listening post on every phone.
Yeah,
but where's the money?
But again, fair compensation in a free market. This is America. We need a free market.
Right, right. Amen.
So that's my diatribe.
Okay, you all got that, I guess, right? You understand the issues? Yeah, good, good. How about in light of that, how about some questions for David? Anybody? Questions? Let's throw it out there. Don't be shy.
I couldn't possibly explain everything.
No, certainly not. There we go. There's a question back there. Zach?
We can probably hear you.
I think they need to put him on mic for the cameras,
I'm sorry.
I think. I
Sorry,
think that's the deal.
sorry
Don't
to step
undermine
on-
me. Yeah. No, I think it's only for the cameras.
Hey, I'm Zach. My question is, how long do you think the invisible hand is going to take to up the compensation for streaming for artists, the amount they're getting paid? Because right now I feel like they're getting underpaid. There's going to come a point where streaming may or may not be the one way we listen to music, and it won't be enough to provide musicians with the money they need. Do you think that streaming prices will eventually rise, or is
Well,
it from
that's,
like an economic view?
I mean, there's two ways for them to rise. One is for us to be untethered from this system, which is not, look, I think it's something like the recent settlement between Pandora and ASCAP resulted in, I think, a 2.3% payment. The record companies are closer to, they're much closer to 14 or 15% of the revenue of Pandora. So that's the disparity. If we had the 15%, do the math, it's like that increases revenues for songwriters by 7 times. That's what it should be. So that's one way. The other way is, I get that it's a revenue model. I mean, obviously these services are, they're paying on net revenue. I mean, if they're not making money, then they're not paying royalties. Well, I'm not sure that's the right model. I mean, first of all, the record business didn't start that way. Right. It wasn't like, if you got paid for records that got sold, you didn't get paid. If the record label wasn't making money, they had no right to withhold money from you.
They still had to pay mechanicals.
They still had to, yeah. So it's a little bit skewed that way. So I think there has to be, again, if there's a free marketplace and we're able to negotiate fairly, we'll come up with compensation that will make sense, and that's what has to happen. And then as their revenues increase, our revenues increase. I mean, their entire business model requires content that we provide them. So they've got to pay fairly. And the timetable for it, I think optimistically 3 years, probably more like 5 years for the Department of Justice to actually implement a change in these consent decrees, again, which date back to the 40s.
Craziness. Thanks, Zach. Someone else? Anyone else? Question? Oh, please. Come on. Somebody's got a question. Yes.
It's Monday.
Buy that kid roller skates.
My question is what you think about artists offering their music for free and not caring about the pay they get for their recorded music. I mean, because if it's a free market, can't I as an artist say I want to offer my music at a competitive advantage versus any other music that is being sold, because I feel confident enough in my business abilities to create revenue streams via selling other stuff or selling tickets and such. So maybe I just want to have that competitive advantage. So like, if you feel, I feel like with the free market, like the free music is like, that's a big thing. That's a competitive advantage. And like maybe is the music industry just moving to a point where nobody cares about selling music anymore and it's time for the artists to man up to the plate with their other revenue streams?
Well, I mean, it's it's an interesting point, and it's one that is raised consistently by artists. And look, look.
I don't think one obviates the other.
I agree. I don't think, I think it's your right to say, yeah, I want to make my downloads available for free. I want to build a fan base here, and I want to, you know, this is the way for my music to get heard, and then people will come to my shows. I get that business model, but that's a big difference from saying all music should be free. I mean, you know, you have the right to give away your music if you want to, and it's, you know, it's obviously been done for even pre-digital. People, you know, labels had these things called free goods, and, you know, they'd give you 10 or 15% of what they made away. It was probably much higher than that. Yeah. Artists, you know, you can give away CDs. I mean, that doesn't really go to the issue of, you know, a songwriter whose livelihood is dependent on income from, let's just use an example that you know, a big band records a songwriter's song. They're responsible for making sure that songwriter is paid for that song. They wouldn't be selling records were it not for that person's efforts and art. So to say that a band can give away its music just because it wants to is fine for the intellectual property that band controls, but for the intellectual property it doesn't control, it has no right to do that.
And I think the other thing we're talking about is parity, so that if the record companies are making 15% and the the songwriters are making 2.5%,
right?
There's just not parity, and this idea that the services can't afford to pay the artists equally, you know, or the songwriters equally, doesn't hold water.
No, you look at what, you know, Daniel Ek of Spotify or the CEO of Pandora makes, and I'm telling you, it's probably more. In fact, I know that it's more than what was paid out to ASCAP for an entire year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a sin.
Yeah, it's a sin. It's absolutely.
Burke.
I don't have a mic, but I guess that's all right. Are there
Use
any
mine.
publishers who are not allowing their songs to be streamed and have the idea of starting their own streaming service?
Yeah, well, that's a very good point. Yes, the answer is yes. And this is the huge turmoil in the publishing industry right now, is whether in fact major publishers are going to pull out of ASCAP and BMI and start their own performance societies. And it's actually quite a real possibility. And if it happens, it's going to be chaos. It's going to be chaos because then you've suddenly got, you've got the open marketplace I referred to, but you've got companies that are going to get into a business they have no idea how to handle. And that is the performance business. ASCAP and BMI have built, and even CSEC have built these networks of collection for 50, 75 years and longer, and they have the skill set to collect, and publishers do not. Irving Azoff started a company called Global Rights. They've actually pulled the Eagles songs from BMI and ASCAP, so they can go to, I use Eagles as an example, they're using their other clients as well, so they can go make their own deals. The problem with that model, there are many problems. The main one being nobody wants it. The publishers don't want it. The streaming services don't want it. They don't want to have to go cut deals with every single publishing company. There are thousands of publishing companies out there. Not, you know, the main 4 or 5 of them control 85% of the market, but the other 15% of the market is significant. And if you have to go make a deal with every single one of those, it's going to take all the time and resources you have. So it's not a good solution, but it could happen if the government doesn't act to make this a more level playing field.
Right. Yes.
You hear me? Thanks for coming to talk with us. I just had a question. After failing as a middle school drummer and realizing you weren't a musician but still had a passion for music, did you ever get discouraged? Did you ever not know which way to go? And if so, how'd you overcome that?
Did I ever what? I'm sorry.
Did you ever get discouraged and not knowing which direction you wanted to go in the music industry?
Discouraged in the industry? Yeah, sure. I mean, everybody gets discouraged. I was majorly discouraged with my, with my management client that I knew was going to be a major star, and I couldn't get a record deal for. I mean, I'm a pretty positive person, but everybody runs into discouraging times. Now, I have to say, I had a nice cushion. Billy and I are I'm a bit older, but the music business was vibrant, and as there were things wrong with the major labels controlling the means of distribution, but one of the things that was good was you had a captive audience. I also grew up at a time when radio was vibrant and played everything from Motown to rock to Glenn Campbell to, I mean, it was a much more kind of, you only had a few outlets to discover music, but they covered a wide swath.
Even the music press, now
and
there's like no music press.
That's right, music press. And I Scott Billington was telling me that, you guys don't even read the music press. And you've got, and this is a city where, and I'm not criticizing you, it's like, but you've got great music writers in this town. I mean, Keith Spera and I mean, you've got really talented music criticism, and you've got a scene where you've got a free, offbeat and gambit, and this really vibrant, and I'm guessing that it's a demographic above yours that's supporting, supporting that writing. But that's a long, I really went circuitous to answer your question. But when I came out of law school, it was still a great, it was still, the economy was booming. It's a different time now. So, I wasn't, even though I had my little discouragements, I always kind of knew there was going to be a place for me in the business, and I just had faith. And you need that faith. I mean, you guys need it. It's like, and you just follow your heart and your mind, and you'll figure it out. But I admit, it is much more challenging today than it was, 25, 30 years ago. Absolutely.
I will say, as somebody who, until I started teaching, every penny I made was coming from how well we did in music at any given year. We don't have time to be discouraged. If you take a time to be discouraged, something's going to swamp you. You're going to get run over. You're going to lose too much ground. I mean, any energy, any day that you give to discouragement is a day that you have been robbed of. And I think that you guys are always up against it, always needing to be as efficient as you can possibly be, as creative, as innovative, as aggressive, as passionate, as tenacious as you possibly can be. And sure, you're going to have feelings of discouragement, and acknowledge them and move on, because you don't have time for it. You will get killed, and you will go away, and they'll sweep you out the door, and that'll be it. It'll be over. So, really, if you're feeling discouraged, that's a sign that something's wrong. There's a problem. Solve the problem and move on.
But don't deny it, because you learn from that.
Acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Discouragement is a sign something's wrong. Right?
But I would also say, and I made a snide remark today in one of the classes that I said, I didn't realize there were going to be that many kids in the class, and I said, there's just not room for you all in the music business. And, and I got some stares and glares, but the reality is, you're not all, I mean, those of you who feel this passion and have this art and bring that to bear, you will succeed on some level.
Yep.
But honestly, if you're not feeling it, there are other things to do, and just don't beat your head up against the wall forever.
That's one side of it, is here for natural selection, right? If you don't have what it takes to go against the adversity and to be really creative, then you'll go find something else to do. That's fine, It's like there was that movie about becoming a lawyer, The Paper Chase. Remember?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The first day they said if you can do anything else, go do it. Is that what he says? I can't remember what he said.
I'm blending two stories. But anyway, the point is that one aspect of it is if you don't have what it takes to kind of battle against adversity, then you'll go do something else. You'll wash out, fine. But the other thing is that all of you are the music business or are a music business. And you may not be part of the larger ecosystem, but you all have the ability to be your own little cottage industry, forging relationships with 500 customers who just adore you and will make sure that they buy everything you do. And that might be enough to sort of earn a good living.
And the beauty of it is people are still consuming music more than ever. People love music. They need music. Yep. It's a beautiful thing, and the world is, it's a big place, and there's like I said, if it's good, people will find it.
If it's great, it finds people.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. So, well, we're out of time, but thank David Hirschland for being here.
Thank you, guys. Good luck. Oh, no.